One of the cool things about the cloud and technology in general is that we're all very connected now. And because we are, we can actually reach out and help people across the world even if we don't know them and we never get to meet. And that's what communities like Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the Azure Academy are all about. So you might find something online like a source or a reference, a blog, a video, and it will help you out to solve a problem or build a solution. And then you can, in return, give a shout out, a comment, a like, a thumbs up to those people and let them know that you appreciate their work and giving that to the community. And I mention this because today's video comes from a source just like what I've been talking about. I've met many customers who want to set up Windows Virtual Desktop, and one of the questions that I get asked is, can we set up some kind of corporate URL so when we access Windows Virtual Desktop, we can do so very cleanly in our environment? And up until now, basically, I've had to say, well, there's nothing that we can do from the Azure side, but maybe you could do something creating internal CNAMEs and things like that. But as of today, I don't have to say that anymore because we've got a solution that'll do this, developed by one of the members of the community out there, and we're going to meet him today as well as talk about corporate URLs for Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm Dean Cifola, and this is the Azure Academy. So our video today comes courtesy of Tom Hickling, who is one of our WVD Global Black Belts. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase black belt in terms of martial arts. It basically means that they have attained the highest levels of understanding of that particular discipline. And at Microsoft, we use that term in that same manner. So a global black belt is someone who's gone through specialized internal product training, usually with the product group themselves, and they're part of the regular ongoing training communications with that team, as well as getting that information out to their customers and the community. And in short, basically, they know more about the products and the roadmap than just about anybody else. And here's Tom's LinkedIn page. You can follow him here for the work that he's done for this video, as well as other contributions to the community. So let me take you back to where this all started, and it's with a post from Tom that I saw this week. So in my Twitter feed, this very issue that I've been talking about, setting up a corporate URL, Tom had a posting here about it, and we can click here to go check out his blog. And I've pulled that up here, and basically he's got all the steps well documented to go through and set up an Azure Functions app in order to get this done. And we're going to walk through this process. So let's take a look at the specific issue that we're trying to resolve today. So here is my WVD web client, and as you can see from the URL up here, this is pointing at rdweb.wvd.microsoft.com/webclient/index.html. Now, there's of course nothing wrong with that URL, but when I give it to people in my corporate environment, this is not only a little bit more difficult to remember, but it's also not something that has my corporate domain here. So what I would want instead is something like wvdapps.msazureacademy.com. Okay, that falls in line with what all of my other internal corporate URLs are. I can give it to the help desk or very easily tell somebody within the company, go to WVD apps, and then you can very easily get to this site. So if we're going to build this solution on top of a function app, then first we have to understand what exactly a function app is. Let's take a look at the Azure Docs. So from the main page of the Azure Docs, we'll go to Products, and we'll scroll down here to the table of contents. We'll pull up Internet of Things. And right here in the middle, we've got Functions. And this is just one of the many different resources related to Internet of Things. And if you're interested in jumping down this path, give me some comments down below, and we'll see what we can do about that. So when we pull up Functions, we've got a quick link here for what is Azure Functions. And to see where functions fit into the model of the cloud, let's start off with infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is where we build things like servers, virtual machines, and those are made up of processors and memory and storage. And you could also throw network in there as well. And in Azure, costs really come from having to run things in compute or store things. So a VM is a large asset that you have to set up to do something. Now, you can go smaller than that with things like containers and Kubernetes. And again, if you're interested in learning about Kubernetes, then please subscribe because we're starting a series on Kubernetes, basically zero to hero, and you don't want to miss that. But containers themselves still have to have some amount of compute and storage associated with them, basically as long as they're running. Now they're smaller than VMs, so the cost for running them is potentially less. Functions are a different beast altogether. They are serverless. And that means we don't have to have compute resources standing by to run this thing. It basically runs as just code segments that are given to Azure directly, and they run on the platform of Azure. And the way that it works, as you'll see, is we're going to just feed Azure some code and tell Azure to do something with it. When it does, then that's going to process, and that's going to then take into account the pricing of how much it takes to run that function app. And because this runs in the cloud, you only pay for what you use, as with everything in the cloud. So if your code isn't running, you're not paying for it. So with that, let's jump over to the Azure portal and start building. So the first thing we need to do is build ourselves a function app. So right at the top here, we'll click the plus to create a new resource, and we're going to search for functions, and we'll click on our function app and hit create. And like building all other resources, we need to put this into a resource group. And I've already got one here for WVD management, so I'll use that. And we'll give our function app a name. Then you can choose to run this as code, which would be that serverless option, or run it in a container. And we're going to choose the serverless option here. So for our runtime stack, we're going to set up .NET Core, and then we're going to provision this in whichever region you like. I'll choose East US. Then we'll click next for our hosting options. And even though .NET Core works on Linux and Windows, we'll be choosing Windows for this. And then for our plan here, this has to do with the pricing. We'll be choosing consumption, although back in the docs, you can read about the premium and app service based approaches as well. And so we'll hit next. Now, in this case, I'm going to turn off application insights because basically we're only doing one thing here, but you could leave this on if you want to have this monitored in case somebody goes and changes your DNS entry, for example. But I'll just leave this off and we'll hit next. Then we'll add some appropriate tags. So I'll add one here for my cost center as well as my application and environment, and I'll even throw in a support contact. Then we'll hit next and we'll click create. So our function app is done, and that gives us a app service here. That's the function app itself. An app service plan, which is the compute that it's connected to when it runs. And there's also a storage account here in case we need to store any data. So let's open our function app. And just to give you the quick tour, of course, we have our banner across the top here because we chose not to turn on application insights because that is recommended. Then we have here an overview and a platform features section. And in the overview, this is where we can start and stop the function app or restart it. We can get our published profile, reset your profile, download your content, or delete it. And then we've got our URL that we entered when we created it, which app service plan it's tied to, and what the pricing tier is. The stuff here on the left we'll get into more in a moment. And then here at the bottom, we need to set up a new function. So we'll click this button. And that's opened a new tab for us here at the top. And because we've set this up as .NET Core, these are the options that we're presented with. And we actually want this bottom one here to do this in the portal. And then we'll hit the continue button at the bottom. And in this section, we're going to select more templates and then hit finish and view our new templates. And the one that we want, because we're dealing with a URL, would be an HTTP trigger. So we'll click on that. And we need to give our trigger a name. Then we have to give our trigger a certain authorization level. And our choices here are making it a full admin, anonymous, and then function. And that'll give the function app itself permissions to do what it needs to do. And that's what we're going to choose and hit create. And this is the code that's going to execute inside our function app. So we're going to just delete it all. And for the code itself, we can get that right off of Tom's blog. So let's go back there. About halfway down the page, we'll find all the code that we need to run this, and we'll just copy that and go back to Azure. And here in our function app, we'll just paste all that code. Now, the one change that we do have to make to the code to make it work for each one of our individual environments is line 32 here, and that's the URL that we're going to do a redirect on. So if you were to set this, you would go to myapps.contoso.com. And when you did, it would be redirected to the RD web client. So we need to change this to whatever vanity URL you are using in your environment. And I'll set mine, as I said earlier, to wvdapps.msazureacademy.com. And then we'll hit the save button at the top. And once that's complete, then click this get function URL, and we'll hit the copy button to copy that because we're going to need that for the next step. And then we can close this box. And now over here on the left side, we can see the name of our function, and then inside there, the individual processes. So we've set up a WVD trigger. Now we need to set up a proxy. So for the proxy here, we'll click the plus, and then our proxy needs a name. I'll just call it redirect proxy. The route template here will just be a /, and our methods will be all methods. And then we just paste in our URL from our function trigger, and then we click create. And then you can see on the left now we've got our redirect proxy. So going back to the main part of the function app, we need to now set a custom DNS that's going to match our vanity URL. So that's a platform feature. So click that and then click on custom domains. And in our custom domains here, we'll click the add button in the center for adding a custom domain. And then you can add that right up here on the top. And then you can click validate. Now, whenever you set up some kind of redirect to a vanity URL, and that means you're creating a CNAME record, you'll have DNS somewhere in the world that's configured to handle this. So our URL that we have to target is msaa-corp-url.azurewebsites.net, but I'm putting in front of that the CNAME of wvdapps.msazureacademy.com. So you have to own that domain, and wherever it is that you manage that domain's DNS entries is where you would set up this CNAME record. Now, you may be wondering, if we're creating a CNAME record already, why do we need the function app in the first place? Well, the reason for this is CNAME records only map from a domain name to another domain name. For example, wvdapps.msazureacademy.com will map to rdweb.wvd.microsoft.com. Now, you cannot map to a specific site within that domain name. In our case, getting to the HTML5 client is in the site of web client, and then there's the index.html page. And in order to get to there, we need to be able to map that directly so that our WVD apps can go right in and we don't have to put in any other slashes or index pages or anything like that. I do this with my Azure Public DNS account, and let me show you what that looks like. And this is my public DNS zone for msazureacademy.com. And if you missed our previous video on Azure DNS, you can go here in the pop-out on the top right. That's the YouTube card, and you can go check out that video. First thing that you need to do is click to add a record set. Then you would add your front end of the URL here, in this case, WVD apps, and then that has the rest of your domain name already here. And the record type you would add would be a CNAME, and then you can also add your time to live and then put in your alias. That would be the msaa-corp-url.azurewebsites.net. And as I said, I've already completed this step, so I'll cancel out of that. And you can see I've already got that record present. Once you do have that and you click validate, it'll show that you do own your domain and the host name is available. And then you can click the add custom domain button. And that added for HTTP, but not for an SSL state. So if you want, you can add a SSL certificate and do a binding here so that you can make this secure. I'm going to skip this step because this is just my lab. So now we should be able to test this. So let me pull up a private page and we'll go to wvdapps.msazureacademy.com. And when we do, it redirects us to the proper login, and I'll enter my credentials, sign in, and it successfully redirected us to our proper URL, and now we can log in and use WVD as normal. So that worked great, but let's take this a step further. Remember in our original example, I showed you that this was the problem that we were trying to solve. What about the WVD management console? The URL for that is rather long as well. Wouldn't it be easier to just go to wvdmanagement.msazureacademy.com? Well, we can repeat the same process. So in the search bar at the top of the Azure portal, we'll just type function and we'll click on our function app. And you can see the one that we have been working with, and there is the one I've set up for WVD management. And I've done the same process that we already looked at. So we've set up a trigger here, and that trigger is using the exact same code from Tom's blog, and we've updated line 32. We're using wvdmgt.msazureacademy.com, and this time we have also changed line 35, and that is our new URL for my WVD management portal. And just so you can see them both together, here is our original that we were working on for WVD apps, line 32 and 35, corresponding to the HTML5 client, and our new one for WVD management with my WVD web management portal. And then we've set up our proxy here as well, just like we did earlier, copying in our backend URL. And in the main part of the function under the platform features, we set ourselves a custom domain for WVD MGT, and then we also added the public Azure DNS record. And opening a new private browsing page, let's go to that URL, wvdmgt.msazureacademy.com. And there we go, our redirect to our WVD management portal works, and now we can get into here and manage our tenant all from our corporate URL. So I hope that you've enjoyed this quick look at Azure Functions and how we could use them for a variety of purposes. In today's video, of course, making a corporate URL for our Windows Virtual Desktop sites to make it easier for everybody to get to our WVD resources and be able to manage them. And if you thought that this video was good, please do give us a thumbs up and click on the subscribe button and join us here at the Azure Academy and become part of a community of people trying to learn all they can about Azure. Contribute to the community by giving us some comments down below or asking questions about this video or any other topics you're wondering about. And if you'd like to get an email when our videos come out, which is roughly once a week, you can click on that email notification bell. Thanks very much for joining us today, and make sure that you thank Tom for his contributions as well. Happy learning.